Alexander Isak is the best striker in the league. Pace, power, movement, elite level finishing. He has it all. He would obviously be a boon to any side in Europe, but because of his brilliance, there are only a very select few clubs that can even consider signing him. And what we know is huge, cataclysmic, shattering, changing. Liverpool are interested. And it's not just Liverpool are interested. It's the champions are interested. You know, this isn't comparable to me saying Arsenal are interested. You can easily rationalise why that just doesn't happen. Seriously, I mean that. You know, if somebody would say to you, well, Arsenal are interested, Arsenal want to sign Alexander Isak, you immediately rationalise it and you dismiss it. Arsenal will not sign Alexander Isak. Alexander Isak will not leave Newcastle United to go to Arsenal. There are a myriad of reasons that I could give you and it's not even worth going into. The reason I mention it, though, is to demonstrate the disparity between Arsenal and Liverpool. Arsenal being interested, easily ignored. Liverpool, however, being interested, could be a game changer because it's Liverpool, one of the biggest clubs in the country, undoubtedly the best team in the country, a team moving on up with an excellent manager, with elite level players, with a couple of Premier League icons, and they are undoubtedly my tip for the top next season. I think Liverpool, and I don't enjoy saying these words, are getting everything right. And I also think, therefore, that the allure of Liverpool is currently more powerful than any other club in Europe. If you were literally the best striker in the Premier League right now, what club would you want to sign for? You could make a case for various teams. You could make a case for Bayern Munich. You could make a case for Real Madrid. You could make a case for Barcelona. You could make a case for Manchester City. You could potentially somehow make a case for Arsenal. But I believe that the only choice that you should be making if you are at the very top is Liverpool Football Club. They're doing too much, too well, too easily. And their project right now is the best and most enticing project in European football, and therefore it will turn the head of any player. And everything that I've just said there about where Liverpool currently sit in the pantheon of great football clubs is why I, to the anger and wrath of a lot of Liverpool fans, labelled Trent Alexander-Arnold a Judas. I stand by it and I believe it to be true. He left the best team in the country to go and join a team that are not the best team in their country. Look, I'm not going over old ground here, but Liverpool, where they are today, they are the most alluring club in European football. I'm terribly sorry for interrupting this video, but would you just do me a massive favour? Please click subscribe. It's a tiny request, but it massively helps me out. If you would be so kind as to click that subscriber button right now, it would really make my day. Thank you so much. The days of Liverpool players having to leave Liverpool to win top-tier silverware are well and truly behind us. Steve McManaman had to leave Liverpool in order to win top-tier silverware. Now, I believe that the sands of time have shifted so vastly that players need to join Liverpool in order to win top-tier silverware. So, Alexander Isak, a player who occupies a position where Liverpool could obviously do with an elevation of options for Arne Slot. A player who is Premier League proven, a player who has done it against the very best, a player who has actually scored goals against Liverpool last season, and a player who has the stature to occupy that prestigious position in world football. Do Liverpool need Isak? Yes. Do Liverpool want Isak? Yes. So, will it happen? I think the answer here is potentially. There are huge stumbling blocks, and obviously getting a deal of this magnitude over the line is more unlikely than it is likely. There are many a stumbling block. Money, for example. But the Liverpool ownership is very unthrifty, shall we say, this summer. They are the high rollers. They are having an extravagant time of it at the moment, but they aren't fools. They're doing it so cleverly. They're doing it shrewdly. And there is a world in which they could make the numbers work. Everything that they have done has been done through the lens of PSR. And if Liverpool are to sell Darwin Núñez, Luis Diaz, potentially Diogo Jota for a decent sum, there is no reason why they can't cumulatively tally that money and use it to test Newcastle's resolve. So analysing the stumbling blocks as to why this deal doesn't happen. Money, finance. I think we have established that Liverpool can finance this deal. The contract. Alexander Isak has 3 years left on his contract, and therefore it could be practically impossible to prize him out of the clutches of Newcastle United. Now, the contract is interesting because I don't think it's quite as gripping as it initially sounds. 3 years, it sounds like a lot. But if you actually analyse it, it kind of only protects Newcastle for 1 more year. Because if they want to get a lot of money on their asset that is Alexander Isak, if Isak chooses to leave, they pretty much will have to sell him next year in order to guarantee themselves top tier value. What you cannot do is allow Alexander Isak to leave the following year when he's only got a year left on his contract, because then the sums of money that we're talking about suddenly fade into insignificance. So if Isak won't sign a new deal and he makes it clear to Newcastle United that he intends to leave when this contract is up, they will probably end up having to sell him next year anyway. Is that fair to say? If you have a 3-year deal and the club that you have that 3-year deal with wants to maximise the value, they want to maximise the sell-on value, it means that you effectively have to sell with 2 years remaining on the contract, which means that Alexander Isak, for all intents and purposes, has 1 year left. Newcastle United are completely protected. They can have their player without any questions asked, really, for 1 more year, but they will have to sell him next year. And depending on how football goes, it's about opportunity. We're talking about huge sums of money at the moment, north of 150 million quid. He may not be worth that next year. You may not get that next year. You may not have the buyer next year. Football is about timing. It's about circumstance. It's about striking while the iron is hot. It's about taking opportunities. There is a world where Liverpool have the money this year, they don't have the money next year. There is also a world where Liverpool have the need this year, but they don't have the need next year. They don't get Isaac, they go and sign a player. The player that they end up signing goes and scores 30 league goals for them next season, and suddenly they're not in the market anymore. Then Newcastle United are lumbered with a player that is worth a fortune, but without enough buyers. So again, the contract I don't think is a major issue. The major issue is actually Newcastle United and how well they did last season and what a brilliant manager Eddie Howe is, and the fact that the club is moving on up now. You know, they are getting out of the darkness. Their light is in fact shining on, and this is the biggest stumbling block, because Newcastle United will want to build around Alexander Isak, not sell him. And I have heard a ridiculous theory suggested to Newcastle United. I think it's foolish, completely irresponsible to even suggest it, so I'm going to dismiss this immediately. Some people are suggesting that it would be in Newcastle United's best interests to sell Alexander Isak for a huge sum of money and use it as a template, use it as a foundation, a springboard to build a team capable of winning the league. Treat it maybe as the Coutinho situation that Liverpool once found themselves in. Sell a shining asset, sell a dazzling star, sell arguably the best player in the team, but get a huge amount of money in and use it wisely. That is being suggested, that this could be Newcastle United's best option. It could be in Newcastle United's interest to actually sell and reinvest the money. Now, this is something that we need to dismantle immediately. Newcastle United do not become a better team by selling Alexander Isak regardless of who they buy. I don't care. I don't want to hear it. I don't believe that there's anything in it. Anybody suggesting this to Newcastle fans or Newcastle as a club is not doing it with their best interests at heart. Newcastle losing Alexander Isak would be a disaster for the club. That doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but it would be terrible news for Newcastle United. Newcastle United, as I'm sure they will, and as I am sure they understand, must do everything that they can to protect and preserve their relationship with Alexander Isak. If Newcastle do sell Alexander Isak, they undoubtedly become weaker on the pitch, but almost more significantly, they would become weaker as an institution. They would become weaker in the eyes of the world, because all of a sudden, Newcastle United become a selling club again. Serious clubs do not sell their best players, and Newcastle United these days are most certainly a serious club, so they cannot sell their best player. If they do, especially to a Premier League rival, selling your best player abroad, maybe you could rationalise it, maybe you could legitimise it, maybe you could make it make sense, but selling your best player to a Premier League rival, and I think that's where Newcastle United's ambition should lie, in terms of challenging Liverpool for the league title. If Newcastle weaken themselves but strengthen their Premier League rival, it would just be such a terrible noise to come out of the club and not in keeping with the perception that they want the world to have of their club. So of the 3 potential stumbling blocks, finance I think they can make happen. The contract, I don't think it's as significant as other people do. It's the club. That is the only one. There's 3 stumbling blocks, and the only one that really matters in terms of getting this deal over the line is the fact that it's Newcastle United. The fact that Eddie Howe won silverware last year with Newcastle. The fact that Newcastle United qualified for the Champions League. The fact that Newcastle United are backed by the PIF. The fact that Newcastle United have some outstanding footballers at the team. The fact that Newcastle United really are moving in the right direction. That is the stumbling block. If Newcastle didn't qualify for the Champions League, maybe lost that League Cup final to Liverpool, it would be a very different terrain that we would be operating on. But the fact that Newcastle United had such a successful season and Eddie Howe is such a brilliant manager, that's the stumbling block. But Liverpool like Isaac. Liverpool want Isaac in their team. On some level, Liverpool need Isaac in their team. And whilst, as things stand, We understand that there has been no contact. There hasn't even been an inquiry. That doesn't mean that one will not come. And Newcastle uttering that their stance has not changed. They didn't want to sell him in January. They don't want to sell him now. And they have suggested that it would take a bid well in excess of £150 million to prize him away. And the key part of the sentence is well in excess of 150 million quid. Well in excess of 150 million quid. That to me sounds like what? The 200 million quid that Paris Saint-Germain paid Barcelona for Neymar? And we know that Newcastle United do not want to sell. We know that Newcastle United do not need to sell. We know that Newcastle United are not under any pressure from their profit and sustainability rules to sell anyone. So if they're not under pressure to sell anyone, why on earth would they sell their best player? And the only reason I can think of as to why is because they might have to. Alexander Isak himself may put them in a position where they have no choice. And sometimes it's important to try and transport yourself and see things through the lens of the player themselves. Now, let's imagine if you were Alexander Isak. Let's imagine that you were Alexander Isak's friend and you were providing counsel for him. What would you be suggesting? I can tell you 100% what I would be suggesting. I would be saying, get to Liverpool now. Do everything that you can to get out of Newcastle, not because Newcastle aren't a great club, but because Liverpool are a sensational club who have the best team in the country. I would say to him, that timing is so crucial in any footballer's career. You may never, ever get the opportunity again to go and play for this Liverpool team. Timing and circumstance. You know, when people suggest that it's in a player's interest to wait, don't do that this year. Don't take that wonderful opportunity this year. Take it next year. Maybe the opportunity doesn't come. Maybe Alexander Isak never, ever gets the opportunity of wearing the number 9 in front of the Kop ever again. Isak hasn't yet said he wants to move, and that makes Newcastle's job very easy. However, if he does want to move, if Liverpool are serious about finding these kinds of vast sums of money, then I think Isaac has to do everything in his power to get this move. The project that Liverpool are currently part of is the most enticing in Europe. They are the champions of England. They are the champions for a reason. They have true Premier League icons at their team. And can you imagine Isaac linking up with Salah? So let's call it a £160 million bid. Can Liverpool, via the lens of PSR, make that work? And I think when you look at the players at Liverpool's disposal, when you think about the amount of talent that Liverpool have in their squad, who could potentially be surplus to requirements, I don't think it's a stretch for Liverpool to find the capacity to put in a bid worth 175 million quid. And then it becomes a question of Alexander Isak wanting the move. Newcastle, I believe, would have to say yes to that kind of bid. And if it came, it would be down to Alexander Isak. People will now be questioning, Rory, come off it. How can they find that money? And I actually think it's incredibly easy. Some class footballers, some brilliant players are now up for sale. And if Liverpool can get top whack for the likes of Harvey Elliott, if they can get top whack for the likes of Darwin Núñez, if they can get top whack for the likes of Luis Diaz, and then potentially some other players leave, players that you aren't anticipating leaving, in the way that Jarell Quansah suddenly ended up a Leverkusen player, we could easily see some other players leave. Maybe Tsimikas goes. So effectively, what we have established here is that the ball is well and truly in Alexander Isak's court. He needs to decide what he wants. Does he want to take this opportunity, or does he want to sit tight at Newcastle? I think what he's seen at Newcastle this summer so far won't be terribly inspiring for him. We've seen Newcastle United miss out on players. Brian Mbeumo at one point felt like he was going to Newcastle. That didn't transpire. Mark Gahey has constantly been linked with Newcastle United, and again, they haven't got their man. Liam Delap. It felt like Liam Delap was on course to go to Newcastle United, and again, they didn't get their man. Time and time again, Alexander Isak has watched Newcastle United miss out on the players that they have targeted, the players that the manager believes will elevate them, the players that the manager believes will bring Newcastle United into title contention. Alexander Isak is a player that should be competing for the league. He's a player that should be competing for the European Cup, literally playing for a team capable of winning it, playing for a team that are arguably the favourites of winning it. So don't get me wrong, I concede this transfer is unlikely. But I've got a feeling it's going to happen. I've got a feeling that Alexander Isak is going to do everything within his power to make the move to Liverpool Football Club, to join up with Mohamed Salah, to be part of this Arne Slot project and to compete and win top-tier silverware. Alexander Isak leading the line. Suddenly, Mohamed Salah going to AFCON doesn't feel like quite as significant a loss as it would do under normal circumstances. Isak linking up with Wirtz. We know that Eddie Howe knows Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes really well. So I anticipate something massive happening here. And if it does, Salah, Wirtz, Isak. What can we possibly say? Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, do me a favour. Please click that like button. Please click subscribe and make sure that you leave your thoughts in the comment section below. The second this video goes live, I will be having a look at what you all have to say. Thanks again. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend. In a bit, yo.